There are moments in your life that split everything into before and after. I don't mean the big ones. Not the weddings or the funerals or the first time you saw your child breathe. I mean the small, jagged seconds that nobody else notices. The ones that happen in the middle of ordinary days, when you're doing something completely mundane like filing a transit permit, or arguing with a cargo manifest, or trying to figure out why the atmospheric processor on Deck 7 keeps cycling 9 seconds ahead of schedule. Those are the moments that actually change you. This one happened at 300 station time, on the lower trading floor of HFY Station Murray, a mid-tier commercial hub sitting at the junction of 3 galactic shipping lanes somewhere between what humans used to call the Crab Nebula and what we now just call home. I was 29 years old. I was exhausted. I had coffee going cold in my hand and a headache that had been living behind my left eye for 11 hours, and I was absolutely not prepared for what was about to walk through the service door at the far end of the corridor. Her name was Sarafina Veilkas. I didn't know that yet. What I knew in the first half-second after she appeared was that she was not human, not even close, and I knew in the second half-second that she was young, or she looked young, which with her kind meant almost nothing at all. But we'll get to that. Let me back up. My name is Corvin Drake. I go by Cor mostly, because Corvin sounds like something your grandfather named a boat. I'm from Brisbane, Earth, the new Brisbane, the one that rebuilt itself after the tidal restructuring of 2071 and came out looking like a fever dream of concrete and kelp architecture. I grew up eating printed fish and watching cargo ships lift off from the coastal pads and thinking, one day I want to be on one of those. The universe had a sense of humor about that wish, because what I actually became was a customs and transit officer for the Interspecies Commerce Authority, which sounds impressive. It is not. It means I sit at a processing terminal for 12 hours a shift, sometimes on a station, sometimes on an orbital platform, sometimes in a secondary hub that smells like 3 different kinds of alien biology all arguing with each other at once, and I check documents. I verify cargo. I approve or deny transit permits. I argue with merchants who think the regulations don't apply to them. I have been doing this for 6 years. I am very good at it. Not because I'm particularly talented, but because I have the one skill that makes someone good at any bureaucratic job in a multi-species environment. I don't flinch. You get used to things, eventually. The Tharkan traders who breathe methane and have to wear sealed atmosphere suits, and whose concept of a greeting involves showing you their secondary teeth. The Vorath cargo handlers who communicate in subsonic pulses that you can't hear but can feel in your chest cavity in a way that is profoundly unsettling. The HFY merchants who travel in bonded family groups of 20 and consider it deeply insulting if you process them individually rather than as a collective unit, which creates spectacular problems with transit documentation. You get used to it, or you learn to look like you've gotten used to it, which is close enough. What I had never gotten used to, what I don't think anyone really gets used to, no matter what they tell you, was the Kael'Vori. The Kael'Vori don't have a common name in standard galactic yet. Every species calls them something different. The Tharkan call them the Velshian, which translates roughly to the ones who remember the old fire. The HFY call them something that my translator renders as the beautiful problem, which I always thought was exactly right. Humans call them vampires. That's not technically accurate, but it's not technically inaccurate either, and once a nickname sticks, it sticks. The resemblance is there if you don't look too closely and you've grown up watching the same 23rd century corpus of Earth vampire fiction that every human kid grows up watching. They're pale. Not all of them, their skin tones actually vary quite a bit, but they have that quality of looking like they've never been in direct sunlight, a kind of translucent luminance to their complexion that catches light differently than human skin does. Their eyes are wrong. Not horrifyingly wrong, just off. The irises are too large, the color distribution is unusual, and they have a secondary reflective layer behind the retina that makes them catch the light in the dark like a cat. And they're old, genuinely, cosmologically old. The oldest Kael'Vori currently registered in the ICA database was alive when humans were still arguing about whether the Earth was round. They don't age the way we do. They don't die the way we do. There's a whole dense corner of xenobiology literature dedicated to exactly how they don't die. And I've read none of it because it makes me feel existentially small in a way I find counterproductive. What I do know from 6 years of customs work is the following. There are not many of them. The Kael'Vori population is somewhere in the low hundreds of thousands galaxy-wide. For context, there are more humans than that on the single station of Murray alone. They are rare. They are intensely private. They almost never travel alone. When they do appear in commercial transit corridors, they tend to move in small family units. The Kael'Vori concept of family being something completely different from ours, but the functional word still works. And they tend to have documentation so airtight and so thoroughly pre-approved that there is absolutely nothing for a customs officer to do except stamp the permit and say have a good transit. They know how bureaucracy works. They've been navigating it for longer than the bureaucracy has existed. So when Sarafina Veilkas walked through the service door alone, at 300, with no pre-filed documentation and no escort and no apparent awareness that she was in a restricted transit corridor, I noticed. I definitely noticed. The lower trading floor of Kael'Vori Station Murray at 300 is not the exciting corner of the universe it is at 1400. The main market is shuttered. The merchant stalls are collapsed and locked. The ambient hum of 8,000 beings doing commerce and argument and trade has dropped to the low thrum of station systems, and the occasional distant echo of a loading bay doing what loading bays do. I was there because of a cargo discrepancy. A Tharkan shipping collective had filed a manifest for 37 crates of processed biomineral, and I had counted 38 when the shipment came in, and in 6 years I have learned that one extra crate is never an accident and is always interesting in ways that will add hours to your shift. I was doing a secondary scan of the crates in Storage Bay 9C, which is accessed through the lower trading floor service corridor, which is why I was there at all. I had my scanner in one hand and my cold coffee in the other, and I was thinking about whether the extra crate was going to turn out to be something boring like a misfiled administrative unit or something complicated like contraband, and I heard the service door open. I didn't look up immediately. Service doors open. Station staff use them. It's not interesting. Then I heard the footsteps, and they were wrong. Not wrong, not threatening wrong, just off, too light, too measured. The kind of footsteps that make you think of someone who has spent a very long time learning to make their footsteps sound like something they aren't. Like someone walking in a way that is slightly too careful to be natural. I looked up. She was standing about 20 feet from me, near the junction where the main floor connected to the storage corridor. She looked about 17, maybe 18, which meant she was certainly not 17 or 18, but that was the number your brain supplied because that's the framework you had. She had dark hair that was almost black in the station's low overnight lighting, and it was long and loose in a way that was unusual for a transit corridor, and she was wearing civilian clothes that were expensive without trying to look expensive, which is a specific kind of expensive. She had her head tilted slightly to one side, looking at me with those two large Kael'Vori eyes, and her expression was perfectly calm in the way that very old things tend to be perfectly calm, not peace exactly, but the absence of urgency. Like time moved differently for her, and right now she had plenty of it. She was also, unmistakably, in a restricted area without authorization. I took a breath, put my scanner down on the nearest crate. Reached for my badge out of habit, because my hand always goes to my badge first. 6 years of training. This is a restricted transit corridor, I said. My voice came out steady. I'm going to need to see your documentation. She didn't move. You're a customs officer, she said. Her standard galactic was perfect. Textbook accent neutral, which most beings don't bother with. Most beings have an accent, the mechanical inflection of a translator, the particular music of someone whose first language does entirely different things with consonants. Hers was just clean, like she'd been speaking it longer than I'd been alive. I said, CTO Corvin Drake ICA. You're in a restricted corridor, and I need to see your documentation, or I need you to step back to the main transit hall, and we can sort this out at the processing desk. She looked at me for a moment, just looked. I need help, she said. That's when the night got complicated. I want to be honest about something, because I'm telling this story and I might as well be honest. My first instinct was not the heroic one. My first instinct was that this was above my pay grade and I should call station security and let them handle it. A juvenile Kael'Vori alone in a restricted area at 300 is not a customs problem. It's a security problem, possibly a medical problem, possibly something much larger that I didn't want to be adjacent to. But she said I need help, and something in the way she said it stopped me. Not desperation. Kael'Vori don't do desperation in the way we recognize it. But there was a quality to those 3 words that was very carefully controlled. Like someone holding something very still because if they move it might spill. Like someone who was not used to asking for help and was asking anyway because they had run out of other options. I've processed thousands of beings through transit corridors. You learn to read things. You learn that the bored bureaucrat you think you're seeing is actually a being who is very frightened and doesn't know how to show it in your species' behavioral vocabulary. You learn that the aggressive merchant arguing about tariff codes is actually panicking because they've made a mistake and they can't afford for anyone to see it. I read her, and I thought this is not a threat. This is someone who needs help. So I made a decision. Okay, I said, tell me what's happening. She moved closer. Not fast, Kael'Vori move at a pace that seems almost deliberate, like every motion is chosen rather than reflexive, and stopped about 5 feet away, close enough that I could see her face properly in the service corridor's overhead lighting. She was, by any standard, striking. That thing about the Kael'Vori and the luminance of their skin was true and present in her, in a way that made the overhead LEDs seem like they were doing her a particular favor. But what I was actually looking at were her eyes, pale silver gray, which was unusual even for her species, and underneath that perfect calm there was something else, something I'd have called worry on a human face. My name is Sarafina, she said. My family unit filed a transit through this station 4 days ago. Standard clearance, fully documented. We were supposed to depart on the cargo runner Velanth crossing, registry K440, at 703 days ago. I ran through what I knew about K440. It was a mid-range commercial runner, Tharkin operation, decent record, nothing flagged. Okay, I said. We didn't depart, she said. My mother and my uncle and my aunt were detained. I felt something cold move through me. That wasn't the station's recycled air. Detained by whom? I said carefully. GSF officers, she said. Galactic Security Forces Enforcement Division. She said it very matter-of-factly, but she was watching me when she said it with those silver eyes. The GSF Enforcement Division is not something a mid-tier customs officer runs into very often, and when you do run into them, the experience is not pleasant. They're the enforcement arm of the Galactic Security Forces, which is the closest thing the interspecies compact has to a military police force. They handle threats to interspecies stability, high-level smuggling operations, treaty violations, that sort of thing. They have extraordinary authority. They can detain. They can seize. They can operate in jurisdictions that would otherwise require 4 layers of bureaucratic approval. They are not supposed to detain Kael'Vori without cause. Nobody is supposed to do anything to the Kael'Vori without cause, not because anyone particularly likes them. The species politics are complicated, and I don't fully understand them. But because the Kael'Vori have been around long enough to have made agreements with basically every major power in this galaxy, and those agreements have teeth that were written by people who had a very long time to make sure the teeth worked. Detained for what reason? I said. She looked at me steadily. They haven't given one. The next 20 minutes were me trying to access the detention logs. I want to be clear. I could not access the detention logs, not because they were encrypted or hidden. They probably were both of those things, but because the first thing I found when I pulled up the ICA administrative system was a flag on the entire Veilcos family transit case. A GSF flag, which means the case was theirs, which means my authority stopped at the flag and could not go around it, under, or through it. This is the moment where most people in my position call their supervisor. I have a supervisor. Her name is Director Amara Fauché. She is from Lyon originally and has been in transit administration for 23 years, and she is currently on a sleep rotation that will not end for 4 hours. I could wake her. She would be furious. She would also know exactly what to do, because Amara Fauché knows exactly what to do in every situation, which is why she is a director and I am not. I looked at the flag on my screen. I looked at the Kael'Vori girl standing in front of me, 17 but not 17, watching me with those silver eyes and that very carefully controlled stillness. "How old are you?" I said. I don't know why I asked it. It wasn't relevant to the administrative problem in front of me. She blinked. It was a very human gesture, that blink, which made me think she'd spent time around humans. "By your calendar." "Sure." A pause, approximately 240 years. I absorbed this. "Okay," I said. "My mother is considerably older," she said, and there was something in her voice that was very quiet and very careful. Not quite vulnerability, something adjacent to it. I thought about a 240-year-old being who looked 17, standing in a restricted corridor at 300, telling me her family had been detained by people who hadn't given a reason. I thought about what it meant to have your family taken and not know why. I thought about Brisbane, about my mother, who used to come to every port to meet me when I was a kid and my father worked the cargo lanes and I would stand with her watching the ships come in, and the way she'd reach down and take my hand when the bay doors opened, and we'd see if the silhouette coming down the ramp was his. I turned back to my terminal. "Okay," I said again, "here's what I can do." What I could do, legitimately, was limited. I could not access the detention records. I could not contact the GSF Enforcement Division directly without going through channels that would take days. I could not flag the case for expedited review without a director's authorization. What I could do was check the physical systems. This is a thing that experienced transit officers know and inexperienced ones don't. The administrative systems and the physical systems of a station are maintained by different departments, and they talk to each other imperfectly, and sometimes the physical systems have information that the administrative systems haven't caught up with yet. It's not a loophole exactly. It's more of a gap. The kind of gap that only exists because nobody bothered to close it, and nobody bothered to close it because usually there's no reason to care. I pulled up the physical location log for Station Murray. It showed me every pressurized compartment currently in use, every life support allocation, every environmental system running at non-standard parameters. I found what I was looking for in 40 seconds. Section 14F deep in the station's administrative spine, nowhere near the transit corridors. Life support running at standard Kael'Vori parameters, slightly cooler temperature, adjusted atmospheric composition, lighting in the low end of the visible spectrum. 3 biosignatures, all registering Kael'Vori metabolic baseline. 3, not 2, not 4, 3. Your family, I said carefully. Your mother, your uncle, and your aunt. Yes. How many of them were with you when you were detained? She looked at me. All of them. There were 4 of us. Myself, my mother, my uncle Verk, and my aunt Sela. And you escaped. The way she looked at me when I said that, it was a complicated look. I was not present when the detention occurred. I had left the transit hall to arrange something for our departure. When I returned, they were gone. I turned back to the physical log. 3 biosignatures in 14F. They're here, I said, still on station, section 14F. Something happened in her face. Something very small, a fractional loosening of whatever she was holding tightly. They're alive. The life support readings are standard, I said. They're alive. She closed her eyes for 1 second, just one. Then she opened them and she was perfectly composed again. I need to reach them, she said. I know, I said, and here's where it gets complicated. Section 14F is accessible by 3 routes. The main administrative corridor, which would require me to have a grade 6 access clearance, and I have a grade 4. The maintenance corridor network, which technically I can access because environmental systems oversight is in my operational portfolio, and this is a very liberal interpretation of that portfolio that I was willing to make right now. And the 3rd route, which is through the physical station infrastructure, the kind of crawl-through service paths that exist on every large station, because stations are built in layers, and sometimes you need to get from one layer to another without going through a corridor. I did not tell her about option 3. I was hoping we wouldn't need option 3. Walk me through why they were detained, I said. Not the official reason, I can see there isn't one. Walk me through what was happening in the hours before, anything unusual. She considered this. We have been traveling for 60 days. This was our 7th transit stop. We had no issues at the previous 6 stations. Where are you traveling from? A pause, deep rim territory. I filed that away. The deep rim is the outermost edge of map space, out beyond the established shipping lanes, where the interspecies compacts authority gets thin and strange things happen. Not illegal, mostly, just outside the usual frameworks. And your destination? Another pause, longer this time. Earth, she said. I looked at her. Earth, I said. Yes. I thought about the transit distance. That's a long trip. Yes. Why Earth? And that's when she said it. That's when she looked at me, at my face, specifically, with those silver eyes doing that thing where they catch the light, and said the words that split the night into before and after. My mother knows someone on Earth, a human. She has not seen him in a very long time, and she would like to. I thought nothing of it, not yet, not quite yet. Okay, I said, that's not a problem. Kael'Vori transit to Earth isn't restricted. Why would the GSF? She believes it is related to the documentation we carry, Sarafina said. What documentation? My mother carries a sealed archive. She has carried it for approximately 400 years. It contains records relevant to the Compact's founding agreements. Historical records. My mother was present for certain negotiations that formed the basis of current interspecies law, and she has kept the primary documentation from those negotiations. I stared at her. She has the original founding documents of the Interspecies Compact, I said, to make sure I was understanding this correctly. Certain sections of them, Sarafina said, the sections that pertain to the Kael'Vori agreement specifically. I thought about the GSF Enforcement Division. I thought about why they might want to get their hands on documentation that pertained specifically to the rights and agreements of one particular species. I thought about what it meant to detain someone with no stated reason. How long has your mother been carrying these documents? I said. Since she negotiated them, Sarafina said, Approximately 412 years. 412 years. The compact was 420 years old. These documents were as old as the framework of civilization. We were all living inside right now. Why is she taking them to Earth? I said. Sarafina's expression shifted. Something complicated moved across it. The human she wants to see. He asked her to bring them, years ago. He said if anything ever changed, if the situation ever changed, she should come to him. What situation? She looked at me very carefully. I do not know if I should tell you more than this without knowing who you are. Fair, that was entirely fair. Corvin Drake, I said. From Brisbane, my mother's name is Margaret, my father's name is. What was your father's name? She said. And the way she said it, past tense, picking it up like she already knew, looking at me with those silver eyes. I felt something move in my chest that was not entirely comfortable. His name was James, I said. James Drake. He worked the cargo lanes. He died when I was 15. Sarafina Veilcos was very still. James, she said softly, and her voice had something in it that it didn't have before, something like recognition. Yes, I said slowly. She looked at me, and then she said the thing. My mother knows you, human, or she knew someone by that name. The human she is going to Earth to find. His name was James, James Anthony Drake. He worked the cargo lines. He was from Brisbane. The world tilted. Not the station. The station was stable, perfectly engineered, rotating at its prescribed rate. But something in my perception of the world tilted very hard to one side, and I grabbed the edge of the crate behind me because my hand needed something to hold onto. That's, I said, and my voice came out wrong. That's my father's name. That's my father's full name. She looked at me. I looked at her. He is dead, I said, because she needed to know that. He died 15 years ago, a transit accident out near the Kepler belt, the ship. Yes, she said quietly, my mother knows. The cold coffee in my hand. I looked down at it like I didn't know how it got there. Your mother knew my father, I said. Yes. How? Sarafina was quiet for a long moment. And then she said, he saved her life. I need to pause here and tell you something about the Kael'Vori concept of debt, because it's important. Humans have debt. We understand it. You owe someone something, you pay it back. The ledger closes. We apply this to money and to favors and sometimes to emotional things, and the ledger always closes eventually because human lives are short enough that debts have a natural expiration date. The Kael'Vori do not have that expiration date. When a Kael'Vori owes you something, they remember it for as long as they live, which is potentially forever. And they carry the debt not as a burden but as a fact of their world, a thing as real and permanent as the shape of a nebula. They don't forget. They don't let it fade. They come back. They always come back. Tell me, I said. Sarafina found a place to sit, an overturned storage unit near the wall, and I dragged one close for myself, and we sat in the quiet hum of the lower trading floor at 300, and she told me. 22 years ago, my father, James Anthony Drake, cargo runner, 34 years old with a wife at home in Brisbane and a 9-year-old kid who watched ships lift off and wanted to be on one, was running a routine cargo hop between Murray and a secondary station called Quelin Point. Routine hop, routine cargo, nothing unusual. He found a damaged shuttle drifting in the shipping lane. It happened, ships got damaged. Debris fields, equipment failures, navigation errors, transit wasn't perfectly safe, especially not for smaller vessels that didn't have the same redundancies as the big commercial runners. Standard protocol when you found a drifting vessel was to report it and continue on. Someone else would handle the recovery. That was the rule. You didn't stop your ship for a derelict because derelicts were unpredictable and unpredictable meant dangerous. My father stopped his ship. He maneuvered close, got a scan, found one life sign. He logged it. I know because when I was 20 and doing my first transit certifications, I found the record in the cargo logs, because cargo runners filed everything. It was one of the things the job required. And then he did something the protocol absolutely did not allow him to do, which was extend his docking arm and bring the damaged shuttle in. The life sign was Kael'Vori. A single being, adult female, in the equivalent of an emergency suspension state. Their biology allows for it in extremis, a deep metabolic slowdown that reduces oxygen requirements to near zero and allows survival in conditions that would kill most species. She'd been in that state for an estimated 3 days. 3 more days, and even the Kael'Vori resilience would have run out. My father brought her in. He spent 4 hours nursing her back to stable consciousness, which meant finding appropriate atmospheric settings and temperature controls, and doing it all from a cargo runner with extremely limited medical equipment and no xenobiology training whatsoever. He spent 4 hours reading everything the ship's database had on Kael'Vori biology, which was not much, and making decisions with incomplete information, and apparently getting most of them right. She woke up. He gave her his bunk. He spent the rest of the hop in the pilot's seat. He did not log what she was or what she carried or where she had come from, because she asked him not to, and he agreed, and he kept the agreement. He delivered her to Quellan Point, and she disappeared into the station, and that was that. Except it wasn't. She looked for him afterward, Sarafina said. She found his records, watched him for several years. She would never have interfered in his life, that was not her intention, but she wanted to know that he was well. She was watching my father, I said. Watching over him, Sarafina said quietly. There is a difference. She never intervened, she never made contact, but she kept track. And when he died, I said. She grieved, Sarafina said simply. He was important to her, not in the way your species understands importance between strangers, but she owed him something real and he never asked for it, and then he was gone. That changes a debt. It makes it larger in our understanding. It passes. Passes, I said. To whom? Sarafina looked at me. Oh. She was coming to find me, I said. She has known about you since you were born, Sarafina said. She always intended to find you eventually, to introduce herself, to explain. Your father would not have wanted her to disrupt your childhood with something like this. She understood that from watching him. But she thought when you were older. I've been working transit for 6 years, I said. Yes, Sarafina said. She has been watching. She's been watching me. Not in the way that should concern you, Sarafina said, and there was something almost gentle in her voice. Almost. She is not dangerous to you. She is. A pause. She considers herself to have a connection to your family, through your father. It is difficult to explain in standard. I sat with that for a moment. A 400-year-old Kael'Vori, who my father had saved from a drifting shuttle 22 years ago, who had been watching over my family, who was now detained on the station where I was currently working, carrying documents related to the founding of the Interspecies Compact, on her way to find me. What is her name? I said. Thessaly, Sarafina said. Thessaly Vale Kos, she is my mother. I turned the name over in my mind. Thessaly Vale Kos. I thought about the physical records log, 3 biosignatures in section 14F. I thought about the GSF flag on the case files. I thought about my father, 34 years old, stopping his ship for a drifting shuttle because there was a life sign inside. I picked up my scanner. All right, I said. Let's go find your mother. The maintenance corridor network of Vekari Station Murai is not somewhere that anyone sane goes voluntarily. I have been in it twice in 6 years, and both times were cargo-related emergencies, and both times I came out with grease on my uniform, and a deep appreciation for the people who actually maintained these systems, because the work they did in spaces this size was genuinely impressive. Section 14F via maintenance access meant going through two junctions, past a heat exchanger array, and through a pressurized crawl passage that had been designed for station maintenance drones and not for adult humans, and was therefore exactly 3 inches too narrow in the shoulder dimension. Sarafina navigated it without complaint or comment. She also navigated it faster than me, which was humbling. "You've been in maintenance systems before," I said, at one point, because I needed to say something and that seemed like the thing to say. "I have been in many stations," she said from ahead of me, her voice completely even, not even slightly out of breath. "Their bones are similar." Station bones. I liked that. There was something very Kael'Vori about referring to a space station's infrastructure as bones. We reached the junction closest to 14F at 3:47. I pulled up the physical access panel. It was covered in the kind of grime that told you nobody had opened it in a while, which was good, which meant nobody was monitoring this access point, and checked the readings. 3 biosignatures, still there, still stable. 1 additional biosignature that had not been there 20 minutes ago. A guard. Of course there was a guard. I sat back against the maintenance tunnel wall and thought about this. The guard was a problem. Not an insurmountable problem, but a problem. I was a grade 4 customs and transit officer with a legitimate reason to be in the maintenance corridor, environmental systems oversight, as previously noted, which was thin but technically defensible, and absolutely no legitimate reason to open a door being guarded by a GSF enforcement officer. Unless I looked at my scanner. I looked at the atmospheric readings from 14F. I looked at the Kael'Vori parameters that the station's life support was maintaining. "The atmospheric system in 14F, I said quietly. "It's drawing on the environmental maintenance network." "Yes," Sarafina said. She was watching me with those silver eyes and she knew exactly what I was doing. "And environmental maintenance is my portfolio." "Yes." "So if there were a calibration issue with the atmospheric system in 14F, you would need to access it directly from the maintenance network," she said, "because the administrative system flag would prevent digital intervention." "That is correct," I said. "Is there a calibration issue?" I looked at my scanner. There is now. It took me 4 minutes to create a genuine, credible atmospheric calibration drift in the 14F life support system. Not enough to threaten anyone, just enough to require direct adjustment from the maintenance network, which was my job, which I had documented authority to do, which I was doing right now. I pulled up my ICA communicator, called the security post directly, not the guard at 14F, but the main security desk on the administrative level. "This is CTO Drake, Environmental Systems," I said. "I'm in the maintenance corridor at Junction 9C, doing a scheduled check. I've got an atmospheric drift flag on Section 14 if I need to run a direct recalibration from the maintenance access point. I'm going in now, just flagging it so you have the record." A pause. 14F is a secured space, officer. "The atmospheric system doesn't care," I said pleasantly. "I'm going to recalibrate the drift and get out. You can log this call as my notification of access for your records." Another pause. The desk officer was, I could tell, trying to figure out if this was a problem. The beauty of atmospheric systems was that they were nobody's friend when they went wrong. Everyone knew about Verith Station and the atmospheric cascade failure of 2093. Nobody wanted to be the security officer who told the environmental systems guy he couldn't fix a calibration drift. "Logged," the desk officer said. I closed the channel. Sarafina looked at me with something that might have been respect. "You are very good at this," she said. "I'm very good at paperwork," I said. "Same thing." The guard at the 14F maintenance access was a young GSF officer who looked like he'd been on this post for several hours and would very much like to be somewhere else. He looked at my badge. He looked at my scanner. He looked at the atmospheric alert that was blinking on the panel above the door. "Drake," he said, reading my badge. "CTO Drake," I said. "Environmental Systems. I've got a calibration flag. I need to do a direct adjustment. You can call it in to your desk if you want. I just notified them 3 minutes ago. I'm not going to be in here long." He looked at the atmospheric alert again. He stepped aside. The room was not a comfortable space. Section 14F was designed as a utility holding area, equipment storage that had been cleared out to serve as a temporary detention space, which told me that the people who'd set this up hadn't planned very far ahead. The lighting was low, adjusted for Kael'Vori preference. It was cool and quiet. 3 beings stood up when I opened the maintenance panel door. I had seen Kael'Vori adults before, at transit desks, through reinforced glass, across cargo manifests. I had never been in a small room with 3 of them. The one in the center was immediately, unmistakably the senior of the group. Not because of size, the Kael'Vori don't index seniority the way we do physically, but because of presence. She stood the way I imagined mountains would stand if mountains could. She was still and vast, and giving the impression that she had been in more difficult situations than this one, and she was not afraid. Her hair was silver, not gray, silver, the real thing, the color that the light actually catches and turns into something. Her eyes were the same pale silver gray as her daughter's, and when they found my face, they found it with an attention that was difficult to describe, like being looked at by something that was looking at all of you. The man to her left was Verk, I guessed. Tall, dark-haired, the same quality of stillness. The woman to her right had to be Sela, shorter, younger-looking than the other 2, but with the same translucent quality to her complexion. All 3 of them looked at me. I looked at the woman in the center. "Thessaly Veilkas," I said. And then I heard Sarafina come through the maintenance panel door behind me. The sound that Thessaly Veilkas made when she saw her daughter was not human. I mean that without qualification. It was not a sound that fit into any human emotional vocabulary. It was too low and too resonant, and it came from somewhere deep in the chest, and it was not grief, and it was not joy, and it was both of those things, and it was something else entirely. Something very old. Something that made the air in the room feel different for a second, like a pressure change, like the space between 2 notes in a piece of music you couldn't quite name. Sarafina crossed the room in 4 steps, and her mother's arms went around her, and they stood like that, very still, the way beings stand when the worst of the fear has just passed, and they haven't found the words yet for what comes after. I looked at the atmospheric panel on the wall. It was all I could think to do. I was trying very hard not to be in the middle of something private. Verk the uncle spoke. "You are a customs officer." "I am," I said. "You brought her here." "She found me," I said. "I helped." He looked at me steadily. His eyes were a darker color than Thessaly's or Sarafina's, almost amber. That was a risk. "Yes." "Why?" I thought about how to answer that. I thought about my father stopping his ship for a drifting shuttle. I thought about protocol and what it cost to follow it, and what it cost not to. "Because someone needed help," I said. "That's usually the reason." Thessaly Veilkas let go of her daughter and turned to face me. I had been bracing for this moment, and I still wasn't ready for it. She looked at me, and I could see it happening. The recognition, the comparison, the seeing someone in someone else that always carries a complicated weight. She was seeing my father in my face, or looking for him there, or finding the parts of him that hadn't made the transit into the next generation and the parts that had. "James Drake's son," she said. Her standard galactic was the cleanest I'd ever heard. Pure, precise, perfectly calibrated, like the language itself was making an effort on her behalf. Yes, I said. She looked at me for a long time. You have his eyes, she said finally, and his way of moving. He always looked like he was about to solve a problem. I didn't know what to say to that. I've been told. He was a good man, she said, simply, not as a platitude, as a fact she had verified personally and was now reporting. I know, I said. My voice was steadier than I expected it to be. I should have come sooner, she said. I told myself I would wait until the moment was right. I waited too long. He was still alive when you were deciding, I said. That's not your fault. Something moved through her expression, ancient and private and not for me, and then it was gone. You came here for the documents, I said, steering us back toward the problem. Yes, she said. And the GSF is interested in the documents. They have been for some time, she said. Certain factions within the current Security Forces administration have been attempting to renegotiate the foundational compact agreements for 3 years. Our agreements specifically. The documentation I carry represents the original language, the negotiated terms. Terms that cannot be revised without the consent of all original parties. The current administration would prefer those terms to simply not exist. I stared at her. They detain you to take the documents, I said. That is the goal, yes. Where are they, I said, the documents? She looked at me steadily. They are not in this room. Good, that was good. They're secure. They are secure. Okay, I said. I was thinking fast, faster than I usually thought, which happens sometimes when the problem is clear enough and large enough that the usual hesitation burns away. Here's what we need to do. Here's what we needed to do. The GSF had the administrative system flagged, which meant any standard transit request was going to get caught. But the physical station systems, the ones I had just used, were not under the flag. Not because nobody had thought of it, but because physical system overrides require in-person authorization, and in-person means being at the station. And the flag had been filed from somewhere else in the compact bureaucracy, and the two systems simply did not talk to each other well enough for the flag to extend into the physical layer. There was a ship. Not the Velenth crossing, that would be watched, but a ship that had come in this morning on a cargo run from Quel'Vori Point, a mid-size commercial runner with a clean record and a departure window of 5:30, which was 43 minutes away. I had processed the cargo manifest for that ship myself, 7 hours ago. I had the captain's direct comm code. His name was Devraj Menon. He was from Mumbai. He'd been running this particular lane for 12 years, and he had once spent a very long time waiting at a processing desk while I sorted out a complicated biomineral declaration, and he had done it patiently and without complaint, and we had talked about cargo running and about Brisbane, and about his mother's pulao recipe, the details of which I still remembered because it had sounded extraordinary. I called him. It was 4:08. He was awake. Cargo runners are always awake before departure. Drake, he said, sounding surprised. Why are you calling me at 4:08? I need a favor, I said. A large one. I will owe you for a very long time. A pause. How large, he said. Passengers, I said, 4 of them, Kael'Vori. I need them on your ship for departure at 5:30, and I need this handled off the administrative manifest. A longer pause. Drake, he said carefully, that's. I know what it is, I said. I know what I'm asking. I need you to trust me that there is a legitimate reason, and I will explain the full reason as soon as we are not on an open comm channel, and I will handle the documentation on the back end to make this as clean as possible. A very long pause. Dev, I said, 4 people. They need to get off this station. If they don't get off this station in the next hour, something bad happens to documents that are 40 years older than this station. Another pause. You're going to explain this to me, he said. Every detail, I said. I promise. A pause that felt like a decision being made. "I'll open the cargo loading access at 500, he said. "Come through the service corridor. I'll have it logged as a last-minute equipment delivery." I closed my eyes for a second. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "My mother's plea better get you in legal trouble worth having." The problem was the guard at the door. He was still there. He was going to be there until he was relieved at 600, which was too late, or until someone told him he could leave, which required authorization I didn't have. I thought about this. Selah, the aunt, who had been quiet throughout most of this, watching me with a careful, measuring attention, spoke for the first time. "I can assist with the guard." I looked at her. "How?" "There is a capability of our biology," she said, "which functions as a mild neuroregulatory influence. It is harmless, temporary, produces a state of mild relaxation and reduced attention in susceptible nervous systems." I stared at her. "Are you describing what I think you're describing?" I said. "Human folklore calls it mesmerism," she said, and she sounded almost amused. "The reality is considerably less dramatic. It works on approximately 60% of species and produces effects lasting between 20 and 40 minutes. It is not mind control. It is more similar to a very pleasant administrative error." "How pleasant?" I said. "He will feel he needs to check on something approximately 50 feet down the corridor," Selah said. "He will feel entirely confident that the door is fine, that everything is fine, and that he should take a short walk. He will not remember this as unusual." "Is it harmful?" I said. "I need to know that." "It is not harmful," Selah said. "I would not propose it otherwise." I looked at Thessaly. "She is careful with this," Thessaly said simply. "She always has been." "Okay," I said, "then yes." At 4:22, the guard at the Section 14F door felt suddenly and inexplicably compelled to walk down to the secondary junction to check on something he couldn't quite name. He did not worry about the door. He was entirely certain the door was fine. At 4:23, 4 Kael'Vori and 1 extremely anxious human customs officer moved through the maintenance corridor network toward the cargo loading level. At 4:51, they were aboard Devraj Menon's ship. Devraj took one look at Thessaly Veilkas and said absolutely nothing, which I thought demonstrated exceptional composure. At 5:29, the ship departed on schedule. I stood in the cargo loading bay and watched it go. I went back to my terminal. I filed a report about the atmospheric calibration issue in Section 14F. I noted that it had been resolved. I noted that I had accessed the space via maintenance corridor under Environmental Systems Authority. I filed the report correctly, completely, and in full compliance with ICA documentation standards. At 6:17, Director Amara Fauché walked in, looked at me and said, "Drake, why is Section 14F empty?" I told her everything. She listened to all of it without interrupting, which was unusual. Amara Fauché usually interrupted. She stood by the window of her office, looking out at the docking ring, and she listened to every word. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You released 4 detained individuals from GSF custody," she said. "They were in ICA-maintained facilities under an improperly filed flag," I said. "The flag was filed without appropriate due process documentation, which I can demonstrate. I had jurisdiction over the environmental systems of that space, and I exercised it." She looked at me. "You helped them escape," she said. "I helped them transit," I said. "That's my job." Another long pause. "Those documents," she said. "The compact founding materials, if she actually has them." "She has them," I said. "And if certain factions within the GSF get hold of them." "They won't," I said. "They're not here anymore." Amara was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to have to write a very complicated report," she said. I know, I said. I can help with the drafting. Something moved across her face. It might have been the beginning of a smile. You're going to be in a great deal of bureaucratic difficulty, she said. I know that too, I said. Is it worth it? I thought about Thessaly Veilkas saying he was a good man with the same certainty that she would have said the sky is real or the stars exist. I thought about my father stopping his ship. I thought about the way the debt had passed, not faded, not expired but passed, the way Sarafina had described it, like something living, like something real. I thought about what it meant for someone to carry a debt for 22 years and then cross the galaxy to honor it. Yes, I said. 3 weeks later, I received a message. No sender address. Encrypted in a format that took ICA's signals team 4 days to crack, and which turned out to have been written using a cipher technique that dated to approximately the 3rd century of the Interspecies Compact. The message said, "We arrived safely. The documents are with the Compact Archivist's office on Earth, submitted under historical preservation protocols. They cannot be seized now, they are public record. The faction that sought them has been formally challenged in the Interspecies Commerce Court. The archive your father kept, the cargo log from the Quelin Point run. I found the entry he made after he brought me aboard. He wrote, 'Found one, brought her in, she'll be okay.' 6 words. 22 years later his son found 4, brought them in. They are okay. A debt passes, but it does not disappear. Yours is different. You created it yourself, and it will be honored in its own time. We are grateful, Corvin Drake. Your father would be too. TVK. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it. Metaphorically, it was digital, but you can fold a digital message in your head, and I filed it in a place I didn't show anyone. I picked up my scanner. I went back to work. There's a thing about transit work that people don't understand from the outside. They think it's boring. They think it's paperwork and stamps and arguments about manifest discrepancies. They're right that it's all of those things. But they're wrong about the boring part. Every day at my desk being stand in front of me who are going places, towards something, away from something, carrying things, cargo, documents, history, debts that have been carried for 400 years. The universe is full of things in transit. Everything is always in the middle of moving from one place to another. My father knew that. He ran cargo for 15 years. He stopped his ship one time for a drifting shuttle because something inside him said, "One life sign, you stop." That was the rule he had. Not the regulation. The rule he made for himself in his chest, where the real rules live. He never told me about it. Maybe he didn't think it was worth telling. Maybe he thought it was just one more day on the cargo lanes, one more thing that happened and got logged and got left behind. He didn't know what he'd started. He didn't know that in 22 years, a silver-haired woman would still be carrying that moment with her, like cargo too important to put down. He didn't know that the debt would pass to me, or that I would walk into it at 300 on a Tuesday night holding cold coffee and a scanner, in a station that smells like 6 species, and humming with the sound of things in transit. But I think he would have been okay with it. I think he would have stopped his ship too.